Hello and thanks for staying on LN 24/7. This is Politics Now. My name is Morno Balagbubu. We've got quite a show for you. So get your family together to sit on the couch and let's talk politics. Well, our first topic today, we'll look at the planned nationwide protests. Here is a rundown of our talking points. We'll look at the government's efforts to avert protests. We'll talk about the youth's resolve for peaceful protest and the panic over fears of violent protest. Joining us on the show from Abuja is Agenyi Arome, who is a policy analyst and the founding partner and executive director CLD Africa and the program lead consultant at the Center for Democracy and Development. Later on the show tonight, we will look at Uganda's anti-corruption protest. Here is the rundown of the talking points. We'll talk about the corruption epidemic in Uganda, why the Gen Z in that country are protesting, and of course, crack down on protesters and opposition, and Museveni's tackling of corruption overall in that country. Well, joining us via video call later on the show is Henry Muguzi, Democratic governance expert. Henry is an African affairs analyst. He is the executive director, Alliance for Finance Monitoring, and overall coordinator of the African Election Observers Network. He's a Ugandan and definitely will be giving us every bit of information we need to understand about what's going on in Uganda. We'll go on a quick short break. We'll be right back to break it all down from you, beginning from Nigeria. Just stay with us. Now, no doubt the Nigerian government has since the past 2 weeks tried to reach out to youths not to embark on the planned nationwide protest scheduled to begin from the 1st of August. Friday's and Thursday's meeting was part of a last-minute push by the President Tinubu administration, which has come under severe criticism over its policies to avert the planned protest. Now, following the removal of fuel subsidy and the floating of the Naira since the inception of the Tinubu government, the cost of living has soared, prompting the administration to reel out a raft of measures, including the new minimum wage and the distribution of palliative. He has also called for patience, and so the APC governors also have called for patience, including the Minister of Information and the Minister of the FCT have all called for patience. Well, these efforts, many argue, are yet to do much in addressing the challenges. Now, in the wake of the planned protest scheduled to be held nationwide, security agencies have warned the organizers, who have remained faceless, to shelve the demonstration. They fear it may be hijacked by criminal elements and turning violent like the NSAS protests. And several groups have also pulled out of the scheduled demonstration, and proponents argue that it is the citizens' right to protest being perceived ill treatment from the government. Well, the president on Thursday met with traditional rulers, and these rulers called for calm over the planned nationwide protest to demonstrate the prevailing economic hardship in the country. Now, Tinubu on Thursday, via his spokesperson, Nigerian Galale, said his administration will uphold democratic principles, including the right to protest, but will not condone demonstrations that leads to the destruction of lives and property. Tinubu said this on the backdrop of growing calls for nationwide protests against economic hardship scheduled to begin on the 1st of 2024. Now, let's move back to the Department of the State Services, the DSS, who has warned the organizers of the planned nationwide protest against proceeding with them, saying it uncovered a plan by some criminal elements to hijack the protest and cause unrest in the country. Now, the military police are also saying and warning against the protest, saying that in response to the economic hardship that these protesters are seeking, to have their voice out there for the government to know that these are some of the issues that they are not okay with regarding to governance. The military and the policemen are ardent that the plotters of the protest intended to use violent outcomes outcome of the protest to smear the federal and subnational governments. And do recall that the APC have put out a list of those that they claim are behind the protest. Well, joining us now virtually from Kubwa in Abuja is our guest, Agenyi Arome. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much, Mona, for having me.
Yeah, so good to have you with us. All right, Arome, I know you've been following all that's been said regarding the planned protest. Well, the government has been trying to convince Nigerians to shun the planned protest. Meetings with governors, members of his cabinet, that's President Tinubu, and yesterday we saw the meetings with the traditional rulers, many of them calling for the president to address the nation directly and also hammering on peaceful protest all across the nation. What are your reactions to the efforts of the president to get this protest not to go on?
Thank you very much. And it's interesting to talk about protest because protest is something that it's a wave that cuts across different countries across Africa, starting from the Senegal, the build up to the elections down to the Kenya, and then coming down to Nigeria. I think it's quite an interesting thing to talk about this particular time, since it has become a singular tool for citizens to speak to a government that no longer cares about them. Having said that, on the question of whether the communication from the government has been quite effective. Well, talking about the question of looking at the question of whether communications from the government has been effective, I would say the government they have run out of lies to tell Nigerians. So it's difficult for the president to come to the media to actually spill more propaganda, spill more lies to the Nigerian citizen. I think that's one of the things that they are grappling with at the moment. And it's appalling to see that the same people that came to power on the wings of protests, if you look back to 2015 and go back to video of President Tinubu and all his cronies that are seriously and sternly speaking against protests, if you listen to what they were spilling during the Goodluck Jonathan's era, you'll be so shocked that these same people, at the flip of events, these same people would come now to say that they are kicking against protests. So for me, I think there is no more lies to tell Nigerians. The truth is glaring. The facts are there. You can see facts and figure how much. Imagine a single egg. One egg cost about 200 naira right now in Nigeria. It was not that under Goodluck. It was not that even under Buhari that we all complained about. So why shouldn't we protest as a citizen? Why shouldn't we go out to demand for what? We employed them. We voted them. Well, we did not even vote some of them into power, but there are some of them that were voted into power. So we have that right to hold them accountable. And if they are saying we shouldn't protest, it's a denial of our constitutional rights. It's a breach of the Constitution, and that alone should be something that should be removed out of that government, because they are actually, abusing the same constitutions that they have sworn to protect as leaders of this particular country.
All right, Arome, the big concern is the safety of life and properties of Nigerians. You look at the mixed messaging from government. On the one hand, a section of the government is calling for shunning, just like the president is insisting. And on the other hand, there are those saying protest will not even hold. On Thursday, you recall that the minister of the FCT said there will be no protest in Abuja after Sowore had posted on his X handle that protests will begin on the 1st of Abuja. Can you walk us through your thoughts on the mixed messaging so far from the government?
Thank you very much, Mona. In the spirit of national security, I want to advise this government that they should not go the same line. They should not toe the same path that they told in 2020, because if Nigeria it's at a very we are at a very dicey point in our national history. We are at a very critical point. People are hungry. People are angry. People are agitating. People are lamenting. So any little any little thing of trying to take gun against the people will inflame the country. And let me also say this, that the North, South, East, and West have already bought into this particular protest. The last one, the NSAS protest, you could literally see that the North was standing alone. So this is where the government should know that they have a very big issue in their hand to deal with. So any plan of taking gun or bringing people to hijack the protest will further pull this country into chaos that we are not planning to get into at this particular point. Then going back to Nyesom Wike, who is Nyesom Wike to say that Nigerians should not protest? Because he's the FCT minister. He doesn't have the right, he doesn't have the constitutional honor to say that Nigerians should not protest. It's our right, and he cannot tell us of what to do and what not to do. If we are doing this within the ambit of the Constitution, Nyesom Wike cannot say that we should not protest as citizens. Yes, we'll go out on that day to protest as citizens. Let's see if he will come out to say that why are we protesting? Then we would ask him who brought him, what brought him into power? Did he swear to protect the Nigerian Constitution? Is he an FCT minister under an authoritarian government, under a military regime? Whether he rules by decree or he rules by the Constitution, then he would be forced to tell us that. So for me, Nyesom Wike is not in Rivers State where he can do all the things he will do and then get away with. He's in Abuja, and Abuja is a home. It's a center for everyone across this country. So we will definitely protest, and there is nothing that he can do as an FCT minister. Yes, there are plans to hijack the protest, but this is also to tell you that civil society organization, activists, and young people across board are not also putting up their own strategy. We know what they did the last time, and we are very much aware that they will still try to do that thing. Even though they tried to hijack the protest during the NSAS protest, it was not quite successful. When they knew that it was not easy for them to hijack the protest, the only thing they could do was just to bring guns against the young people. And that was the only thing that took us off the street. But this time around, we are all going to protest, and we know that an injury to one is an injury to all. Even when anybody falls, we will still stay out there to protest until we see that Tinubu stepped down from his office, Akpabio stepped down from his office, and then get out of that place to bring in people that we know that have the mind.
Now, Arome, that word you said, step down. Many will find you're saying government should step down to be offensive. Now, let's not forget that this rhetoric is why security agencies may likely use force to prevent protesters from protesting. So what happened to the process of impeachment via the National Assembly? If you say people should come out and say the president should step down, I thought the bane of the protest was for end bad governance and not really remove the president from the seat of power. I think we should be very careful of the words that we are using.
Mona, chaos will only come from the government side. They are scared, they are afraid, they have no any other options. They know once the young people are allowed to go to the streets, we will not back down until we see that we achieve what we want from this particular government. So they are scared. All of this propaganda is focused on deterring young people to go out there to protest, because they know once people step out to protest, it will be difficult for them to sit down in their office to do anything reasonable. Now, after having said that, asking that the president should step down is not going too far. It's never going too far. We are still within the ambit of the Constitution. Now they say the court have legitimized their office. So if the court have legitimized their office, it therefore means that they are voted into power by the people. That is the implication of what that statement is. Now, the same people that vote you into powers are passing vote of no confidence on you. We don't have the confidence that you can rule this country. We think you are no longer capable. If I employ you in an office and I feel that your services is no longer needed. And I ask you to go because your services is no longer needed, either because you are incompetent or you are incapacitated. It is nothing, I have not done anything wrong. So Nigerian citizens, according to what according to what he said, that the court have legitimized President Tinubu's office. It therefore means that the Nigerian citizens, we have agreed that by going by the court, it's been agreed that it is the Nigerian people that have voted President Tinubu. The same people that voted him in, according to the court now, are saying, we are tired of your work. We are no longer satisfied with what you are doing. We employed you. You are not delivering on your deliverables. Therefore, step down from this office honorably and leave so that we can bring in someone that we think can rule or can deliver on the key deliverables that has been given to him. So I don't think the people have done anything wrong.
Now, Arome, from what you were saying, we can infer that you want the president to stand down, which justify those who feel this protest is political. Would you agree with that?
Thank you very much. We are not impeaching the president. We don't, by virtue of constitutional distance, we don't have that constitutional onus to impeach the president. We can do that through our representative and the Senate, through the National Assembly. That is settled. But we can mount pressure on the president to resign if he's ineffective and he's incapacitated and he can no longer deliver on what has been given to him to do. So we are not saying we are impeaching the president. That's not what we are saying. We are only saying that, Oga, we know that you are incapacitated. We know that you are incapable of delivering, of taking this country out of the squalor of poverty right now. We are asking you to resign honorably. We are not saying we are impeaching the president. Now, going to talking about the National Assembly, you will agree with me that we don't have a National Assembly. A National Assembly that doesn't respect rights. You heard what the Senate President told Natasha on the floor of the Senate. The National Assembly.
Arome, I don't have anything against what you just said about the National Assembly because, as you all know, we know there is a big disconnect between the National Assembly and the citizens of this country. Now, for the record, the Senate President has apologized to Senator Natasha. Hello, are you there?
Even if he apologized, that shouldn't be coming from a hallowed seat as that. That's to tell you the extent to which these people can go in order to satisfy what they want. We don't have a National Assembly that is interested in the Nigerian citizen, in Nigerians. We don't have the National Assembly as that. The National Assembly we have is the National Assembly that is interested in their pockets, is interested in looting, is interested in doing all sorts to protect themselves and protect what I think they.
All right, so Arome, now how do we streamline the grievances of the people and then the efforts of the government to avert this protest because of security concerns? Now, economic hardship on one hand, peace and security on the other hand. So how do we meet this together? Yes, the people want to say what's on their mind. They want to protest economic hardship and also bad governance in the country. But at the same time, do we do that at the expense of our peace and the security of lives and properties?
National security, the president should step down. In the spirit of national security, the Senate president should vacate his office. In the spirit of national security. Now, streamlining that, that's what this protest is. It's for the protest. Now, talking about the leadership of the protest, I think the reason why the government is crying foul, they are looking for who to influence, they are looking for who to bribe, they are looking for who to pick, in order to whittle down the forces of the protest. That they can't get. That is why they are crying foul that they need a leadership, they need a face for the protest. And the people don't need a leadership to come out to speak against the undoing of the government. So it's, for me, leadership problem has been solved. Nobody to influence, nobody to pick, to put in the DSS DSS bunker or whatever. So because of that, they are crying foul and all of that over the leadership of the protest. Then streamlining it in the spirit of peace. The president knows what to do. The recklessness of this government is very appalling. In a time where we are complaining of workers' wage, the FCT minister was very proud to say that they spent 21 billion naira renovating or building a house for the vice president. Adding injury on that, the government has the effrontery to go spend about how many billion, about 100 billion naira to buy an aircraft. Come on now. As I speak to you, federal government schools across the federation, their students are at home. Secondary school students in federal government colleges. I am saying this because I have somebody that is currently at home because their school asked them to go home, that the government had not given them the meal subsidy they are supposed that they are supposed to give them to feed these young people. We are talking about people within the age of 11, 12, 13, 14. What have those children done? They are currently at home. They couldn't finish their exams. And we have a government spending 21 billion naira to go and build a house for one.
Sorry to cut you short, Arome, but if a good number of protesters walk with this line of thought for the president to step down, don't you think it will be easy for the protest to be hijacked? Because there are people in government who are supporters of the president and his administration and would not sit down and watch people, cajole the government to step down. And I don't know if you get what I'm saying, Arome.
What the people that hijack the protest?
Now, Arome, anybody can sponsor protest hijacks. If that's my answer, basically, anybody. Could be the government, it could be, compromised members of the protesters themselves who want to see anarchy.
Have interest, those governments and their cronies. See, a well-meaning Nigeria. See, let's be very sincere. Let's be very sincere and frank about this. A well-meaning Nigeria, a Nigerian who feels the boss of the people, will never sponsor people to hijack this protest. The people that sponsor people to hijack protests are the politicians. Let's take it or leave it. The likes of the Senate presidents and their cronies, who should call them, they are the ones that sponsor people to hijack.
Okay, Arome, let me ask you, who bears more of the casualty when it comes to protests, based on what we saw with NSAS and even in Uganda?
Go ahead. Bear the casualty. There is a balance in Nigeria. There is a particular word in Nigeria that we use very well: all die and die. This time around, all die and die. Let's just face the reality. Now, bearing casualty, not bearing casualty is not the question. What we are ready to do this time around, let the necessary thing be done. The president should step down. If he's not stepping down, then let him up his game. Number one, reduce the salary of the legislator. Reduce your own salary. Look at what Ruto in President Ruto in Kenya did. Even though we hear that there are other new ways he's employing to bring back those people that he sacked back into his government, but we saw how he reduced salaries and wages and reduced numbers of appointees and all of that. See, the recklessness.
Okay, Arome, we're almost out of time, but before you go, for the sake of peace and national security, how do young Nigerians go about these protests in a peaceful manner? Because they would have to collaborate with the security agencies. Who has assured the nation that they will secure peaceful protesters?
We already have a history of that. We already have a lesson. There's a build-up from 2020. The 2020 protest was very peaceful. You will agree with me that in the history of Nigeria, that is one of the most peaceful protests that Nigeria have witnessed. You will agree with me. The media, everybody, even the government, they allude to that fact. What the only different thing, the twist about the 2020 protest was the fact that the government took arms against the people. The people were not unruly. There were people that were sent to hijack the protests. These same people that were protesting, the same young people that were protesting, took hold of those people that were sent to hijack the protest, gave them to law enforcement agents across the federation, in Abuja, in Lagos, and some other parts of the country. So the time that the protests went out of hand was when the government took arms against the people. So if the government stayed to the part of their bargain, the protests will be peaceful, and the people will not take arms. Nigerians will not take arms.
All right, thank you, Arome, for joining us. But let's make one thing clear that we should both agree on, that is security personnel and protesters should work within the ambits of the law. Do you agree on that?
Definitely, Nigerians will not destroy property. But finally, from me, is democracy as it was defined in a very simple, is a government of the people, by the people and for the people. This government is about us. They should allow the will of the people to prevail. If the people say they want to protest, let the security agencies do what they should do by protecting the people. When they see anybody going outside the ambits of their constitutional right in terms of protest, they should arrest those people and put them in detention. But the security agency should not take arms against armless Nigerian citizens. That is what we are just saying. That we will go out to protest. The security agency should protect Nigerians and not kill Nigerians. And we will do it within the ambit of the law. We will not do anything unruly. We will definitely protest within our constitutional right, so that this government should know that there are people in this country and that they owe allegiance to the people and not to their pocket or to the money they make from this government.
All right, our time is up, Arome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mona.
Okay, we'll go on a quick break. Do stay with us. Politics Now continues. When we come back, we'll talk Uganda anti-corruption protests. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still on to Politics Now right here on LN 24/7. Uganda anti-corruption protests. Let's give you a rundown of our talking points once again. First, the corruption epidemic, why Uganda's Gen Z are protesting. Crackdown on protesters and opposition. Finally, Museveni's tackling of corruption. And joining us virtually is Henry Muguzi, Democratic expert, an African affairs analyst, also the director of the Alliance for Finance Monitoring and overall coordinator and African Election Observers Network. He will be joining us shortly. Now, the call to action over corruption was organized by young Ugandans online with colorful posters, urging people to march on Parliament, drawing inspiration from neighboring Kenya's mostly Gen Z-led anti-government protests. Now, on the eve of the rally, Ugandan authorities had besieged the headquarters of the opposition National Unity Platform, NUP, of former presidential candidate Bobi Wine, and arrested 3 of his party members. Now, Ugandan authorities frequently have cracked down on the NUP and Wine, a pop star who actually turned a politician and challenged Museveni's unsuccessfully conducted elections back in 2021. Now, you look at what is going on in Uganda, the challenge of corruption. Graft is a major concern for this nation, with several high-profile scandals involving public officials, and the country, which is ranked lowly 141 out of 180 countries on the Transparency International's Corruption Index. Now, dozens of people who joined anti-corruption rallies in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, on Tuesday in defense of the official ban have been charged and held behind bars. their lawyers has revealed to reporters. About 60 people, including a prominent TV and radio presenter and 3 young protest leaders, were hurriedly brought before the courts and remanded in custody on charges including being a common nuisance, they said. Well, President Yoweri Museveni, who has ruled the East African country with an iron fist for almost 4 decades, had warned at the end of the weekend that the demonstrators were actually playing with fire. Now, when you look at the corruption situation in Uganda, it's been called an epidemic. So let's just break it down for you. There's been sanctions from other countries. Let's start with the United States and Britain, who slapped sanctions on several Ugandan officials, including Parliament Speaker Anita, amongst other 3 former current ministers for alleged involvement in corruption. Then the ministers are also on trial, being accused of stealing iron sheets destined for the poor under a government-funded project and redirecting them to politicians and their families, but no charges. I repeat, no charges have been laid against the speaker, according to reports. Then also, 4 legislators from Uganda's ruling party and 2 senior civil servants are also in custody for allegedly embezzling large sums of money meant to compensate farmers who lost property during the 1980s bush war that brought Museveni to power. Well, there's just a lot to talk about. We've done talking with the protest situation in Nigeria. Well, joining us now from Uganda via video call is Henry Mugunzi. Thank you so much, Henry, for being with us again on the show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now let's break down some of the highlights of what the president said on Thursday. We've got some cards to show for you so you can understand his own point of view. Now, just like we discussed with the Nigerian protests, you have the view of the concerned youths, and you also have the concerns of the government. Now, Museveni said that funding from foreign sources that are always meddling in the international affairs of Africa for the last 600 years, slave trade, colonialism, neocolonialism, genocide, economic exploitation, etc. He says the authors and participants of the demonstrations were planning very bad things against the people of Uganda. He says those very bad things will come out in court when those arrested are being tried. If it was a patriotic, anti-corruption, peaceful demonstration coordinated with the police, I would have been the first to join. These are just some of the highlights from the statement released on the president's X handle. Henry, what are your thoughts on some of the claims the president made in his statement on Tuesday?
That's interesting. So, as you quoted it right there, I manage the Alliance for Finance Monitoring, an organization that follows the money in politics and public institutions in Uganda, but also across Africa. So, as a Ugandan who lives in Uganda, so those statements made by the president resonate with what he's been saying for the longest time, and that is, so he tends to be the type that blames all the bad governance of his regime to foreigners. He is typical. For example, I am not sure it is foreigners that have directed or told or asked the officers in his government to be corrupt. It is not foreign governments that have asked them or requested that the government should violate rights. But what I do know is that he's quite uncomfortable with a civically competent citizenry. And every time the citizenry rises and asks questions, and as you know, holding the government in Africa accountable is quite a discomforting position that many don't want to be in. And therefore, every time he's held accountable, and we know accountability cannot be given on a silver platter, it has to be demanded. He tends to brush that off as being efforts and initiatives of foreigners. And by foreigners, he always refers to the developed North. Now, the other thing we know about President Museveni is that those who have worked closely with him over the years have told us that he's a micromanager. So he is he's commander-in-chief of the army, he's commander-in-chief of the economy, he's commander-in-chief of all government institutions. He wants to be the one initiating and directing everything. And therefore, when it comes to the war on corruption, he wants to take he wants to be the sole individual taking the charge, but also the credit, but also to be seen as the only one that can deal with corruption. And therefore, I think he's coming out and saying, I would have joined if it was not funded by foreigners. The truth must be, no foreigner funded it. The young people of Uganda have been going through a lot of disquiet. They are, what can I say? They have been restless. They are economically vulnerable. They have gone to school. They remain jobless. The president has done nothing. His regime has done nothing. He's been promising every after 5 years when it comes for election. He promises modernization. He promises middle income status. He promises jobs. These things never come to pass. May I tell also the viewers that, every year in Uganda, the tertiary institutions churn out 4,000 young women and men who graduate, and they get into the economy to compete for the only 900 jobs that Uganda can create annually. And therefore, many of them are jobless. They have resorted to riding motorcycles to make a living. On the contrary, they are seeing the profligacy of the leaders in parliament, the profligacy of Mr. Museveni's government, because we are told, and reports, the newspapers and online media is awash with the millions of dollars that are spent every day by the office of the president and his home, which is the State House. And so this anger has been building over time. And therefore, when they rise to express themselves, especially after the recent, corruption of magnitudes that are incomprehensible and beats everybody's understanding in the Parliament of Uganda, allegations and the exposés that were, revealed on X. We have a platform we call exhibitions, and that's where we exhibit all the corruption. So on X, they have displayed the profligacy of the Speaker of Parliament, for example. For example, there is evidence that hairdressers are purchased at £1,500. They even put the store where she goes to purchase these. She drives the most sophisticated Mercedes Benz. She oversees a kitty that she abuses at will. She recently procured electricity generators.
Henry, that's quite serious. Now, the ministers are also on trial, being accused of stealing iron sheets destined for poor people on the government-funded project and redirecting those funds to politicians and their families, but no charges laid against them at all, which is very similar to what we are passing through in Nigeria, where funds for the vulnerable set aside by government are being siphoned elsewhere. Now, as someone who has ruled for over 40 years now, talking about President Museveni, why has he not taken responsibility for the fate of his people? Statistics, put it out that over 60% of people in Uganda are facing poverty.
You need to understand that when a regime has been in office for close to 4 decades, and that regime subjects itself to elections periodically, it needs quite a number of tools to ensure its longevity in power. But one of the 2 most expensive, most effective tools are violence and money. Now, when you use violence to stay, or to win an election, you win ugly. And therefore, you draw the attention of the international community. And therefore, for the most part, they have resorted to money. So politics in Uganda is highly commercialized. So the proceeds of corruption come back to finance politics and to ensure that the regime stays in power. One of the, of course, you mentioned it, the ministers that were suspected of having stolen iron sheets. Those a few, I think 2, 3 of them were charged, but those charges are almost up to no end. But of course, there's then the recent, the renewed efforts we've seen, where about 6 members of parliament are in jail on orders of the president, allegedly because they participated in soliciting bribes from government institutions in order for them to be allocated higher, to be, to improve their budgets and be allocated higher allocations in the national budget. But also what we see is that there have been too many scandals of corruption, and he's beginning to act on them. One of them was the cooperative scandal, because when the president took over power in 40 years ago, he found cooperatives operating, and under his watch, these cooperatives collapsed. But they collapsed because some of the bushwar fighters looted their properties, and therefore they couldn't, allegedly they looted, so the cooperatives collapsed, and therefore they've been compensated. So through those compensations, there was a syndicate between the ministry officials in the Ministry of Trade and legislators, and so they shared this money amongst themselves, and so those are also in jail. So what we are saying is that, okay, there is some a semblance of finally realizing that the president should take action. But what we see is that there is a sense in which he believes he's the only one that must take action. So anybody else should not be seen to interfere in his, to step on his turf, and that turf being that he should be the one fighting corruption. So the young people, when they were rising to express, to add their voice and express their displeasure at the rampant corruption that has manifested the legislative house for the longest time, I think the feeling was that they shouldn't. But of course, we do know that as citizens of the country who have been angered, and let me say this as well, shortly before that demonstration, one of the veteran bushwar fighters who now heads the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Honorable Kahinda Otafire, speaking at one of the universities in Kampala, he was urging young people to rise and say no to corruption He was telling them, you people are young. You have 40 years, 50 years stake in this country. Some of these thieves you are seeing that are sabotaging your future do not have more than 15 years. So you have to rise. So he also instigated them. But as always, he got free.
All right, Henry, let me play a clip of what the president said regarding the youth. This was before the protest, saying that the youths have cheap food to eat and so have no reason to protest. Let's have a listen.
While we the wealth creators are busy creating wealth for Uganda, some elements, some of them from opposition, are always working with the foreigners to foment chaos in Uganda. Riots, illegal demonstrations, illegal and inconsiderate processions, etc. These people are unfair and inconsiderate, and they should check themselves. We shall have no alternative but to check them. You must. Now, when you hear people talking of demonstrations, demonstrate, when you demonstrate in a place like Kampala, people are sitting on the roadside. They are sitting on the roadside. When I pass by boys there, they have got their chairs on the roadside. Are you going to step in people's products or trample their chairs, their furniture? You are playing. Do not have such ideas in your head. If you have got some good ideas, there was a time when Nakarema some time ago organized us, and on the weekend, on the Sunday when there was nobody on the road, we walked to Kororo and we were talking about corruption. So if you want, contact Nakarema on a day when there is no Sunday, there's no traffic here in the center. At least we can go to Kororo and talk nicely about whatever we want to talk about, but do not bring. Don't be tempted to.
All right, Henry, what are your thoughts? Let me let you in.
Things he said are quite egregious, my brother, because you see, first of all, we have to stop blaming foreigners. We have to stop blaming our deficiencies as leaders of African countries on foreigners. It's us who have mismanaged our own things. Now, the problem that we have in Uganda is that the president has refused, or let me say failed, to understand the needs of the young people from the perspective of young people. He wants to understand the plight of young people using his experience. Those days are long gone. The young person of today does not have much time to get wealth. They don't believe in the future, they believe in now. And he's telling them, look, I've been, fighting for 60 years. The young person doesn't have 60 years. They want to get it now and here and now. They have looked at the policies. He's talking about middle income status by 2040, maybe blah, 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 da, 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 da. The young person says, I don't need 2040, I need 2024. Where is my job now? The young person, they go without food. Their interest, all they have and their interest is, as you know, they have a smartphone and internet bundles. This is all they have. But they're saying, look, we cannot make a future with a smartphone and internet bundles. It's not food. We can go without food. We are young. We want to be to enjoy life like we are seeing you enjoying. You want to drive luxurious cars. You want to, to have businesses. So I think one of the disappointments of young people today is that the leadership has failed to understand their interests. So they interpret them in a way and manner that does not make sense. The policies they put in place do not make sense. And so I think the president has just...
All right, Henry, let's talk about the protests now. Was there any form of violent ones? Because protesters fighting with security to move freely, like we saw in that video clip where we had, the protesters sitting on the floor with their posters and all of that, and then protesters destroying properties, because those are two different things.
So I think what you and the viewers need to understand about Uganda is that the president, whose election and re-election has been challenged every time it happens, has been facing a lot of what's it called, opposition from losing candidates, and many of them have said that the only means to remove Mr. Museveni is not going to be through the ballot, but through forceful means. So there was a narrative that was being traded to do a repeat or a replica of the Arab Spring, like instigate people to rise, demonstrate, cause chaos, and within that chaos, get some, very diehard men and women to march onto State House and oust him. So every time we speak about demonstration of any sort, the president hears one word: an attempt to remove me from power. And therefore, whether it is by young people, whether it is by babies, toddlers, he thinks the toddlers, somebody will take advantage. So where we are now, there is fear that any of the people that want him out of office will ride on any form of violent protests, any form of protests to oust him. And therefore, protests for him means survival. And therefore, that's why he wants to quell it in the best way possible. If what happened in Kenya happened here, he fears that his government could collapse. So this is how high the stakes are in his own understanding. And so, and as long as that is his perception and view of what could become out of a protest, we are likely to have, no such protests allowed, even however peaceful they have been said to be.
All right, Henry, before we go, what's the game plan for someone who has been in power for so long? I mean, is he planning to install a puppet or probably his family member, like we've seen in the Sahel region of the continent? What is the hope for Ugandans who seek emancipation from his regime?
My understanding, for most of these African leaders who were, who led revolutionary movements and came to power, and these revolutionary movements morphed themselves into political parties, the word legacy is not something that they attach a high premium on. And so if you look at the configuration of Mr. Museveni, I think it's clear that the configuration of his mind is that I must die in power. And when I die in power, let happen what will. So I don't think he thinks a lot about that legacy. But that said, we can see that already he's preparing his son to take over. And so we don't know how that is going to happen. It's going to be difficult for the son. He could take over from the father, but to hold on to that power could be an issue. But I don't think General Museveni would mind so much about what happens after he's gone. I think what happens to him is that for as long as he's alive, he must be in power, and therefore he must do everything within his capability, and he levers to make sure that he achieves just that. So that's the tragedy of countries that are being led.
All right, Henry, that's the much we can take with you right here on the show. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'll leave you in the words of Tiger Ray Chaguta, who is the Amnesty International's Regional Director for Eastern Southern Africa. And he said this. He says the heavy-handed tactics being used by the Ugandan government to stifle and silence peaceful protesters show a manifest clampdown on dissent. People in Uganda have the right to express critical views against official corruption in government and human rights violations by the state, and the expression of such views should not result in imprisonment. And I will say that the same thing goes for Nigeria, but the only difference between Nigeria and Uganda in this case is that we are yet to see what government is going to do. Like I said during the course of our conversation with Arome Agenyi, that there is mixed reactions from the government. Some want people to protest peacefully, while others don't even want the protesters to go out to protest. Well, we'll be keeping tabs on developments regarding protests in Nigeria, Uganda, and of course around Africa and the world. Once again, thank you for tuning in tonight. My name is Mono Balabubu. Have a pleasant evening. God bless you.